Well, hi, how's everybody doing? My name's Chris. It is now 9 a.m. here in Los Angeles, and
Hey.
I think that makes it 5 there in the UK, all right, Simon?
Yeah, 5
Yeah.
o'clock.
I always get tongue-tied when I have to put these sentences together, and I have no idea why. It's very easy. I admin a group here in LA called LA Sound Mixers, and we're dedicated to the mentorship and education of production sound professionals. We started as a very LA-focused group, and now we seem to have quite a few people from abroad. So we just try to keep our mission to mentorship and education. And this series of interviews is dedicated to finding how mentorship played its role in the development of our friends' careers. And we did our previous interview with Jan McLaughlin, which was really awesome. And today we are really happy to welcome Simon Bysshe. So welcome, Simon. Thank you for joining us.
Hi, Chris. Thank you very much for having me. It's a real pleasure.
Sure. And I would like to, just for a little housekeeping, if you could enter your names on your screen there and the city that you're in, so that we can just get an idea of where everybody's from. If you have a full-on question, please click the raise hand button, and I'll notice it there on the side, and I'll call on you. But if you're just asking for a quick clarification of something that's in the moment, feel free to chime in and ask for that clarification. But just know the difference between the two. And you can also enter your questions in the chat portion, and I will try to scan those and get to those as I can. So that would be really great. But anyway, so first question, starting off, Simon, how did you get started in the craft, and what was it about you that drew you into working in production sound specifically?
Okay, how do I get started? Well, I guess I was interested in, kind of straight out of uni, I was interested in internet technologies and interested in software, and I was quite driven into a slightly alternative world where I saw myself doing coding, computer games and things like this. And I found myself, after about 2 years, didn't go to university, went straight into that. I found myself thinking, no, do you know what? This isn't quite for me. I'd much rather get more into the creative arts side of things. So after trying to do it on my own and run my own thing, I decided to, with the help of my parents a lot, they helped me get into an art foundation course where I started enjoying the things that I used to do so much in my earlier years, like painting and sculpture, and kind of working with wire and working with my hands and drawing and all these sorts of things. And that kind of led into, they had some video cameras in Southampton where I was studying. And I just started doing little short sort of animations with video cameras, just sort of stop frame animations and adding sound effects at home on my computer. Nice. And doing a little bit of editing and those kind of things, and enjoying the whole process. I wasn't focusing on any one thing. It was just the joy of making stuff. And so that was just a 1-year foundation course. And off the back of that, I also sort of at the same time, this is a really sort of long-winded way to get into the sort of sound thing, but at the same time, I was really interested in esports, and Counter-Strike was a really big game at the time, team-based Counter-Strike, as was like Warcraft and StarCraft too. So I was really interested in those games, but more specifically, I was interested in like the people who played them and the gamers themselves and the kind of camaraderie of clans when clans play against other clans. And I was a terrible gamer, but I was really interested in like being a spectator to these sort of events. So I wanted to document like what it is to be a pro gamer, because no one quite appreciated like what a pro gamer is about. And if a pro gamer is a geek or someone that just sits at home and does no social life or something like that. And I sort of wanted to quash a little bit of those stereotypes. So I did a documentary about that.
Yeah, people had a lot of stereotypes about that until they started seeing like stadiums being erected for esports. And it's
right. I know. It's
wait a minute.
Huge. Back then, it was like it was just after 2000. So there wasn't really anything. There was the occasional big event. Like I went to one called Esports World Cup, and there was one in Dallas, Texas called QuakeCon. So I went to a couple of those with my crummy little video camera and did some video interviews and followed a team from the UK. And I met John Romero from ID Software, who'd made Doom and Quake, and it was cool. So the whole thing was like editing these things together. But the one side of it that was terrible, and I cannot apologize enough to people who endured it, is that it was all being recorded off the onboard camera on the top of my crappy little DV cam. And so I was really unhappy with the fact that whatever I did never seemed to quite come across. It didn't have the power, didn't deliver. It was okay, but it was just not there. So that was one thing that when I decided I wanted to pursue this kind of making of documentaries, editing, the whole process, to go to film school. But the film school course was thoroughly overbooked in Bournemouth Arts Institute. They were very popular, and I was told, you know, good luck. There's a lot of people who want to go there all around the world. And it turned out the only sort of thing that they were looking for was people with an interest in sound. And I was like, well, in the interview, I said, I do have an interest in sound. I've got no idea how to do it, and I'm absolutely terrible at it, but I'd like to learn. And I was just keen on like being able to offer like a good soundtrack would be enough for me to be satisfied that I'd done my part in a production, you know. So from day one of that course in Bournemouth, you were told that you were the sound person. You were expected to know what you were supposed to do with a microphone. I had absolutely no clue. So yeah, that was my introduction to sound.
Yeah, it's almost like you get off the boat, here's your rifle, go to war.
Yeah, there's a 416. What's a 416? SQN. It was a DAT. It was a DAT machine. It wasn't even an HHB DAT. I think it was a Tascam DAT machine.
Nice.
And the SQN and a like 2-meter cable and a boom pole that was you could hear it creaking on set. And a very old rusty 416. In a creaky cradle. I don't even think it was a Rycote cradle. It was some other cradle that I've never seen again. So yeah, that was a Stocko.
So that was some of the first gear you worked with in school. When you started working professionally, what were some of your first gear purchases at the time?
Yeah, so I sort of started with actually I was given a boom pole by Simon Hayes. He gave me a Panamic Maxi boom pole. So that was like one of my first bits of pro kit that I ever got my hands on. And it was a wicked present at the end of a 10-week job. Simon just handed me over this boom pole. It was like, and
that's actually going to be my next question is about mentors and guidance. So yeah.
Oh well, so yeah, absolutely. There's a whole chapter about him. But the first thing I sort of bought was actually a sign case. I think it's called Cine Case, but it's a company in Bristol that made these beautiful aluminium cases. So they're quite small, not Pelly cases that are quite bulky all around the edges. They were very neat little cases, which had some segments inside. And there was a sound recordist who I got to know whilst just being a student. He'd recently retired, and I went to his house and I said, can I just have a look at some of your stuff in your garage? And I just bought a load of boxes. So that was the first thing I ever bought, is just cases, stuffed decent cases, or waterproof nice cases. And then I started buying like G3s, because they were always really useful. If I went on set with someone, I wanted to sort of have my own receiver, so that I didn't limit the number of, because there's always a real limit on receivers and stuff. So I quite like to have my own receiver, just so I could take it home in the evening, you know, that sort of stuff. But yeah, my first recorder was a 744T.
Nice. That was the recorder that I could never afford. I could actually afford it. The 6 Series came out.
All right. It was beautiful. I still love that. I still use it to record atmospheres and stuff. All that. Yeah. Never I just need to a single mono track or something.
Yeah, that is a phenomenal recorder. Well, cool. So I mean, it sounds like you went to film school, and then after that, let's talk about mentorship relationships. How did you making that transition from film school into the professional life? So many students are having to go through that, especially this time of year. How was that journey for you?
It was kind of driven by my own fear of being left out in the wilderness at the end of a 3-year course, which wasn't that great. The course was in Bournemouth, so it's on the coast, on the south of England, quite far away from London, quite far away from any film studios, a bit too far for any real pros in the industry to come and visit. So within the 3-year course, one pro sound recordist, real top at the time sound recordist, came and visited, and his name was Sandy McRae. and Sandy was brilliant. He brought in his cart, he brought in his trolley, and he talked about some of the jobs he used to do. I think Jewel of the Nile, you know, you remember that film? Just beautiful film. And he spoke about the work and about the politics, and it just lit up, like it was like, wow, that this is someone truly telling how it is, and not just academia side of it. So there was a lot of film history in our course, which was completely irrelevant really to a lot of the actual stuff we ended up doing in the industry. So through Sandy was a part of AMPS, the Association of Motion Picture Sound in the UK.
Mm-hmm.
And he
Which
recommended
is like it's the UK equivalent to the CAS here in the States.
Yeah, exactly. There are groups, and there's an AGM, and there's meetings, and there are people who sort of help sustain it, companies that help sustain it and do shows and stuff, and they have get-togethers. And at this stage, there were very few student members. So this was sort of back in like 2006. And so I went along to one of their AGMs, and there was everyone: Ivan Sharrock, Simon Hayes, like all of the bigs. So I got to meet a lot of people face to face at the AGM, and that this was whilst I was still a student, and sort of that really helped me then give me a little bit of so just having that association there made me think, wow, there is actually a group of people who openly communicate with each other and work together. They're not like bickering, and they're not sort of arguing about things. They're trying to working together to solve common problems. And at the time it was Diva, you know, it wasn't the problem. It was like, this is a new thing. Would you guys, you know, moving from a 2-channel recording system to 4-channel to 6 to, you know, so this was all happening at the time, and there was lots of time code issues and post-production syncing. So there were all the issues at the time were being discussed by all the pros, and just to sit in a room with them and listen was amazing. So that for me was like an opportunity that I thought whatever I can do to learn more from the people who around me, that was what I tended to do. So it was a combination of getting their phone numbers and just calling them and trying to find the right time during the day to call them and ask them whether I might be able to sit in next to them during a shoot as a supernumerary person, as a student, just to sit and watch.
Right.
And not put any pressure on them to try to make it an arrangement where I'm paid or anything like that, because I'm not going to do anything. I'm just watching. And that arrangement worked out fine, because I got to visit lots of really cool film sets over a course of one summer holiday.
Were there any specific programs set up to help you do that, or was this just you know, shaking hands, talking, and asking?
To be honest, if there was, I don't think it would have been half as effective as just going out and doing it on your own, going off your own steam and making the awkward cold call to someone and sending them a CV and then calling them again to check whether they had a chance to, you know, see if there's any time that I might be able to go in just for a day, you know. So there is a scheme, and there was a scheme, and maybe in those times, but there is currently like a trainee scheme where you can sign up and you can be put onto things. But I feel it's much better to actually somewhat target people that you kind of would like to, if you get the opportunity of those. So I targeted certain sound recorders who I thought were just brilliant, like for example Simon Hayes, and after a little bit of harassing, I managed to get it.
So you were very lucky to be able to just even go and observe their work.
Yeah. It wasn't a scheme. It was just me sort of banging on the door and asking, and it was, I suppose it was a busy time of year as well, a busy time where lots of people were working, lots of shoots were going on, and people were quite happy.
And so when you were there, let's say your first few days you're visiting a big set and you're just watching as a fly on the wall kind of intern observer. Well, you know, obviously I remember for me, the little hairs go up on the back of my neck and you start noticing everything. What were some of the first things that you noticed that were just important things to learn? Had you not learned if you were in that environment?
I think I sat in with Tim Fraser and actually this was with Jim Greenhorn. It was on a film called Breaking and Entering, and Jude Law was the star of this show. and this was one of the first big sets in was it Ealing? Elstree Studios. So they had a big set built up in Elstree Studios, and I saw Jude Law's face on the screen, and all I could say to the sound mixer was, "Wow, Jude Law, wow!" And he's like, just no. None of that, please. We're focusing on recording, so you just sort of, to learn that you don't, to forget about the star factor and to get on with the focus of the job. And I think I learned quite quickly to sort of just not articulate that particularly because it was not the style, but I was taking the whole, trying to remain kind of calm, I guess. But the other thing was just keeping an eye out around me. I was constantly getting in people's way, not open to seeing where people were moving. And so, yeah, I mean, it was, to being totally green on a film set is pretty terrifying. And I felt very green for a very long time. I really, because working with some top people, you're constantly seeing what you're no good at and not really feeling like you're fitting in. It takes a long time to feel just comfortable on the film set. It really does.
Yeah, I remember the first day of my internship, I was asked to get a stinger from the juicers, and I just knew somebody was pulling one over on me.
Right.
Yeah, I'm like, what? Yeah, so I know exactly that feeling. So as far as the personalities, the mentorship personalities, which were the people that really took you under their wing and said, hey, we'll start that relationship with you?
There was quite a few mixers. Simon Hayes gave me a really big break in that he got me on a 10-week film called Love and Other Disasters, and on that job it was the routine that I learned more than anything. It was a military precision routine, and the day started early and promptly, and it was full on all day long. And you didn't complain, you got on with it, you reacted quickly. And by the end of the job, I felt like I'd been sort of whipped into shape. But it was, for me, every day, all I could hear was what I was doing wrong in a kind of constructive criticism most of the time. It was, so the best for me, the best mentorship is a brutal one, I think. When they're not afraid to tell you what you've done wrong and what you could do to improve. So I would mess up. We'd be laying. One of my jobs was carpets and cables, coffee. So
yeah.
So running tons of cables and organizing that, making it safe, and laying a huge. Simon has half a van full of carpets. And nowadays he's got a separate van full of carpets and blankets. So this was before his extreme carpet obsession. This was kind of just before it went really mad. But it was still everything was carpeted. Under dollies, under track, everything wherever possible on set. If the edge of frame was here, then the carpet would just touch the border of the safety line. Yeah. So and it would help with the acoustics. It would help with the sound of footsteps. And Simon was like, if you can take anything from this job, take satisfaction that the sound we recorded was much cleaner because of the work you put into laying carpets. It was like, okay, I'll take that on board. But yeah, and yeah, so he was really good, and I would sit next to him, and I'd sit on it over his shoulder, and learn pretty quickly not to ask him questions when he had his headphones on, because it'd be like this. What? It's like bothering the man.
I can say that same thing happened with me. Yeah, for sure.
That's a good Simon impression you just did.
Bysshe, enough, Bysshe. Listen. What? Okay. Sorry. Yeah.
Oh man.
Yeah. So he could be. No, he and his team were a joy to watch. Really, they were so tight. They were such a tight crew. And they, actually, the one thing I really liked is that Arthur, his main boom op, is a phenomenal boom op, and his personality really is what makes everyone just enjoy being around him, because he's really great fun, he's very entertaining, he's got that quip that will have the whole crew burst into laughter, you know, just after an awkward moment or something, you know, it's just the right level. And and he was like, but there's a pride to being in the sound department. There's a genuine, like, we're the fucking sound department, you know, we're the fucking sound department. And it was that feeling of, no, you know, yeah, okay, it's something to be proud of. It's something to be, you know, to feel like you have a grade that's worth consideration and respect on set. And that's the way they went. They're the sound department. You don't mess. You listen, and I mean, in other people, and you respect other people as well. But you know, give and take. So I try to take on, but the problem with going from that style to then working with someone different who is much more okay, we'll compromise that in order to win their favor for something else. You know, there's the styles of working, which is, I learned pretty quickly, you can't apply the same no compromise, 100% clean, absolutely everything, every single take perfect. You can't apply that on every job. You really can't. It's different styles of working are not always applicable to that style of working. So, and he does obviously he just does films. And then going on to TV dramas where you're much faster paced and you can't just run out carpets and you can't do everything in the same way. You can't always cover things in such brilliant ways. It was difficult for me to get out of that mindset and sort of relearn other people's ways. So it's really good. That's the main thing for me, is that working with lots of different people when you're still learning. So as an assistant, I really work for a ton of different sound mixers, and I'd go through all their boxes and see what gobbins they had and toys they had and stuff, and try to sort of think, oh yeah, I'd like, if I did this, I would have a van organized like that, and I would have a box like that, and I like that idea, and I'd try and take all these little things on board that I think you might not get if you work with one person for a very long time and you don't quite get the full picture of other people's methodology and the benefits of someone's methodology who is more relaxed and is a bit more forgiving in some ways. You might find yourself going into a certain avenue of work which better suits a personality like that or something. Nothing against the mentality of getting it down right, but you can still do that without being a certain way, or without having to be very, very loud on set. You know.
Yeah, sometimes just the inertia of your own, just sometimes the inertia of your own career can just pull you into certain styles of shooting where you stay there. I have friends that do almost exclusively kids shows and puppeteer work, and that's just that's the calls they get. And I have other friends that they do episodic TV, season to season to season, and some people get pulled into ensemble comedies. So that's a very specific genre where you have 8 or 10 actors and a lot of really funny people who could go off book at any moment. So all of those foster certain workflows that you have to be sensitive to, adapt to, and to help tell the story. So I can certainly see where you're coming from, for sure. So I'm guessing Simon gave you that boom pole after that 10-week job because maybe he felt like he ride you a little too hard, or what?
I don't think it was a sorry or anything. It was a thank you. It was just very cool. It was a very cool gift. And I still have it, and it's still like the pole. It's got a bit smelly. It needs a good clean every once in a while. The fabric on the end, not particularly best designed for.
Yeah, well, cool. And so there was a question that popped up from John McCallop in Texas. Yes, that is the same Simon Hayes who mixed Cats.
That's the one.
Yeah, and sorry, indeed what they pulled off there was mesmerizing. So that was definitely charting, going into uncharted territory for a production sound crew.
Yeah. And, they would one of the first things Simon ever asked me to do on one of my first days on set ever was go up into the rafters in a very old stage in Shepperton. And there was you could see daylight coming in through holes in the ceiling. And he said, go up there and put blankets over all of those gaps. I want it all clean, because there was a catering truck outside, just outside the main doors. And that's where they were serving lunch on a continuous day. So people had to go get their lunch quickly and come back in.
Right.
And they were right outside. So the generator could kind of be heard through these gaps. So so he had me going up into the rafters and plugging gaps in walls. And then when he could still hear it after that, he asked me to go and ask them if they could turn their generator off. And this is like really, you know, going way beyond what most people would feel kind of comfortable, but you do it and you can work with it and you can have an agreement, and locations work with locations. So you really do like push as much as possible to get, and I guess through pushing, after a while, people and locations will, remember, you know what, let's just not put it there in the first place, you know, avoid the hassle. So yeah. So yeah, he really does go full on, and I took a lot from that style of working to identify all of the smallest annoyances, covering up grills and vents and anything that might make noise on set, and everything else.
Yeah, generally the you know, the diplomacy side of things is the one that's the tool for some of us, that's the one that takes the most time to develop, and I always find that the more demanding the mixer, the better they are at diplomacy usually, because if they're really going to want this stuff, then they've had years now figuring out how to approach it, how to negotiate for it, how in the best possible way, while still maintaining your alliances on set and your, you know, just keeping everything going.
That's right. And I think now it's moved, that diplomacy has become much more critical with the costume department nowadays, because of the reliance of radio mics on shows where you've got 3 or 4 cameras and you've got dialogue, which has to be clean. And for example, with shows like LAVS and CAS, they made the agreement early on, it has to be usable. So, you know, and more shows now like Succession were like, this is a radio mic show. Don't expect to get much on the boom. In fact, we'd rather you didn't, you know, have them in the way, because it's 2 cameras on zoom lenses and you're working constantly with changing headrooms, constantly changing headrooms and constant improvisation. So it's like, so the collaboration becomes much more key, especially in prep, with working with costume, to know what you're going to get in the morning and have an idea of, have it already organized, so there's not a big delay.
Right. Yeah. That was my next question, was your work on Succession, the HBO series. I gotta say, I watched, I guess it was the last few episodes of season 1, where the company went to England to shoot a couple of episodes there, and I remember seeing your name on the credits at the end, and I'm like, that's the URSA guy. Yeah, he's
right.
Like in the States, we know you as the URSA guy, and that's part of what it inspired me to ask you to do this, was because you're a mixer too. You've been a mixer. You started as a mixer, and you know, we usually see you with your URSA shirt on, showing people how to lab things. But, but I really, you know, I didn't want people to forget, you know, what your roots are and how you got started. So, but Succession, I mean, can you describe to us getting that call, maybe how it came to you, and then the mixer on the show that season, I believe, was Billy Sorokin.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
So, how did you? What questions were asked and answered, and how was that changeover between you and Billy?
So at the time, well, this was a terrifying change for me to get into Succession, because I've currently been doing a very comfortable job, which was a single camera show called The Informer in the UK, and it was 1 camera mostly, and I was mostly not heavily relying on radio mics, so we had them on all the time. It was 2 booms. It was very staged and designed, and it was beautiful. It's almost old-fashioned filmmaking. And then I had my agent, part of the UK workflow of finding work, especially on the higher end of things, films and high-end TV, is you really need an agent, because the first people that productions go to are the agents and say, okay, this is the new job, or the agents will represent producers, and then so they'll know first who has got a new job, and they'll recommend people to those producers straight away. So to get an agent in the UK is pretty critical, and it was through my agent independent that this opportunity to have an interview for Succession came along, and the main thing that was said at this by the line producer called Ron Bosman was that this was a very radio mic heavy show. That's the way it's been in New York for the last 8 episodes, because of the shooting style, and that meant going. And I had a 788, and it meant moving up to a 688, moving from 8 channels to 12 channels. this was the show that made me have to get more than 8, because it's absolutely, I would never be able to do it on 8. And I'm very glad that I made the switch in time. And it happened at a time where I had about a week break between the Informer and this starting, and being able to then completely change over the cart and test the new system and get it all up. So the main thing was really making sure that I was in a position to be able to record 12 radio mics, or at least 10 radio mics and 2 booms. That was quite common, 10 radios and 2 booms, or 11 radios and 1 boom. And
if it's okay, can I show those pictures of?
Yeah, sure, man.
Let's see. Desktop.
And yeah, listening to the mix on that show, it really was radios they used. Even when I felt like they had it on the boom, they just used radios the whole flipping time.
Yeah. Can you see that?
Yeah, that's in East Castle. So this was like near the Welsh border. This amazing old-fashioned building where it was a castle, but it wasn't actually a traditional castle. It was a modern-day built castle. So there was no worries about getting messy inside or anything. But anyway, yeah. So that's the CL12, and I have my little phone there. Well, it's just a regular old school iPod, I think, and that's just working with the Wingman.
Okay.
For track naming and stuff. And one of the big things at the start of that show was that the most communication I ever had with post-production on that show, and the most critical conversations that a lot of people, I realized that the workflow and planning of file naming and folder structure, and obviously time code is so key, that there were some very serious emails saying, no, this is exactly how it has to be. And Billy was recording this on a Zaxcom system, and I was obviously sound devices, so I was a bit worried that they might not be happy about that change. But it turned out it didn't make any difference. It's just so long as I kept to the same folder structure and file naming structure, that it was cool. So there was a lot of chat about that kind of stuff.
And what kind of cameras were they using on this show? For interface?
Alexa Minis.
Okay, yeah, very common.
I think there were 3 bodies, but there were 2. So the DOP, 2 camera operators, 2 focus pullers came over from the States. And what surprised me straight off on day 1 is that the focus pullers and the camera operators come up to me, say, "Can we get a set of cans?"
Yeah.
It's like, oh, no one told me that I needed like more cans. I mean, I had spares just in case, but it turned out that everyone on set needed cans, and clearly because constantly they would want to. So I was making a mix that was maybe when there was a big ensemble and the camera was looking at different parts of the room, I was bringing up people who were having an interesting conversation and focusing my mix on maybe that conversation. Then I'd see the camera actually moving over to that conversation. It was like, wow. and then I'd be always ISOing things and trying to listen to where the next, there was this wedding scene that most of which was cut down. But it was so funny because it was just a chaos, and camera zooming in and finding little moments, and it really felt like a huge collaboration that you knew that they were listening to the mix and that they were making their decisions based on that.
So that wedding scene got pretty complicated with the reception and the speeches on CAS was doing speeches on mics and
that was cool.
I mean, they cut it down to look really simple, but apparently shooting it wasn't that simple. Is that?
Oh yeah. Well, there's a couple of things about that. I think we've probably had enough of that picture now. There's some other ones of like my tent and stuff like that. But like, we'll get there. So what was it? So that big sort of marquee that they had set up. If you've seen it, the show in the last 2 eps is all about basically Matthew McFadden, Tom Wamsgans marries Shiv, who is the daughter of Rogan Roy, played by Brian Cox. So it's their wedding, and it's a bit of a sham, to be honest, because it's all just about money and power. They had this incredible marquee set up, and one of the things that kind of took me by surprise on this was that they were having speeches with a microphone, and no one had discussed whether or not how that was going to work. Like, they're holding a mic. Okay. Luckily I had a mic that they could hold. It was a wireless mic. And I had 2 speakers, 2 like small anchor speakers. So we set them up and we asked art department, is it okay for these to be in shot? And they were said, yeah, fine, if it's normal for this sort of thing to have speakers in shot. And I said, yeah, they're just on the side. It's quite subtle. And I just thought this would be, although if I could make this clean and I could record an ISO, I mean, I was recording an ISO, but I could decide how much of their mic to put into the final mix, put onto set and put through the speakers. And I knew that I knew that this was something I'd have to commit to from the first shot to the last of these sort of speeches. And it's one of those things which I feel like sometimes might get overlooked a little bit in prep, is quite how much do you want that to be real? How do you want that to be real? Do you want freedom to do that later? But the style of the show was so real and so fast and so like, it felt to me that wasn't even a question that needed asking. It was obvious. Everyone in the audience has to react to what he's saying, and it makes it feel all the more real to have a microphone that's coming out loud over a PA and the booms, and everyone's radio mics will hear that. And it just gave it genuinely it just made it feel like the real deal. And I didn't feel like I was compromising. It was contributing as opposed to sort of compromising the feel on set. I wasn't trying to minimalize it, bring it up and down and get a clean audio. It was what it was. And the end product, I think, sounded just like it did on the day. It was just like the room on the day, and it felt good. It felt real. And the other mad thing was that Kendall Roy, played by Jeremy Strong, his character is going through a massive mental breakdown at this time. Right. There's a mad accident at the end of the last episode, and he kind of stumbles back to the tent, and he's going through a great deal of stress. And one of the things he asked us to do, because he's got quite a he has a style of performance which is sort of method, in that he likes to have an earpiece with music playing to him if he's in it to get in the zone. So he likes it before a take, but also sometimes during a take. So he picked out a piece of music. It was like a Philip Glass type composition. It was quite abstract, and he wanted us to play this to him. And it was a scene where he's dancing with his kids, and the kids are saying this is one of the first times he gets to sort of connect with his kids. He's constantly pushing them away, and this is the first time his kids are, Dad, come on, let's dance. And so all this awful scenario has just happened, and he wants to try and forget about it and dance with his kids, and his memory keeps washing back to this incident. And so what we were tasked to do was to have the upbeat music playing through the speakers, and then to gradually fade in this like terrifying Philip Glass music, but for everyone to carry on dancing as though it's like this poppy tune. But what Jeremy hears is this like screeching cacophony of noise, and it helps him. You then see that he is falling back into that bad place again, and then gradually bring back in the music. That's really interesting.
So much of that character's, it was all this inner turmoil, the stuff that he's feeling and not saying. So to get those things to manifest themselves in a place where we can actually see it and feel it. It's pretty cool that the sound department plays that role in helping make that happen.
Yeah, totally. It really was. He would often ask us, like, if we'd pick certain tracks, and quite often we'd play it out on a speaker, or in this case, it was a combination of an earpiece, induction loop, and choosing between speaker and playback, depending on what was required. And the director would sort of point at me during the take, and that's the point where I'd gradually fade from like cacophony back to poppy music. And then it was this brilliant, I just felt like that's a nice, and it was all done off the cuff. It was all arranged and organized 10 minutes before we filmed. This wasn't discussed. It was an idea at the time that was made reality. And that's the kind of stuff that I really enjoy. You feel like you're adding adding something special.
That's cool.
Yeah, and you're part of it. So that was great.
That's
tricky.
Cool. But those are the things you always have to be open to.
Yeah, totally.
You don't know all those other creative processes going on around you. You have to be ready to help them, and so and hopefully they can help you when you need it. So that's very cool. So your access to pre-production time and to the creative nucleus, I guess, during pre-production for Succession. Was that was that extensive as far as pre-planning, and how did that compare with the other shows you typically do in the UK?
This was way bigger than anything I'd ever done. This was definitely a step up for me personally, because HBO. I mean, I've been doing BBC One dramas, but then outsourced to other production companies, mostly like Peaky Blinders also. So like they're big productions, well known, but not necessarily big budgets. And this was a really large budget per ep. And there were more meetings than I've ever been to in prep, that's for sure. So there was lots of discussions about just big production meetings are normal, but there was much more communication in advance about everything, and the whole recce process was very extended, and we went everywhere. I mean, and do you know what? It wasn't that different, to be honest. It was just, it was kind of the same process as you do on a different drama. It was just bigger, more people.
Felt like it was a little more at stake.
Yeah.
I guess too, if you have a lot of the players on the crew coming in from another, from New York or from the States, I mean, that's going to be a little bit intimidating because you just want to learn their workflow, their style.
Yeah, that's right. The DAP was very cool. And he just sort of took me under his wing. He said, all right, Simon, this is going to be a bit of a nightmare for you, but we'll look after you. We'll help you. Let's help each other. I'll try and tell you as much as I can to help you in advance. And and so we had, it was nice. It was a very friendly crew. And and you know what? Like they would play music like offset. The camera department would have a little speaker on the magliner, and it was just a really positive feeling on set, and people would just enjoy being there, and people would genuinely like the project, and we knew we were making something a bit special. So I got a really good vibes from the crew, basically. That's cool. from the US crew, and it was a very can-do kind of attitude they brought. They were rushed into doing these last 2 episodes. It felt there was a feeling of slight rush and panic in the pre-production. There's an awful lot to organize, but I felt better vibes from that crew than I have from most UK crews.
Yeah.
Who can be a bit like,
well, I would imagine. Yeah, I would imagine a lot of it has to be, with, hey, we shot 8 episodes in the States and now we're in a new place,
that's pretty cool.
They're on an adventure. So it's, that's kind of cool when the craft you love takes you places.
But I just got a genuine sense for the love of the work and the can-do attitude that I don't often see, and I really enjoyed that part of the shoot. That people just enjoyed it.
Very cool.
We
do have a question from Robin Jerry Rose. What LAVS did you use on Succession?
DPA 4060s almost exclusively, even in ties and whatnot. At that time, 6060s weren't out at that point, and I was reluctant to change. I was reluctant to use anything except DPA 4060, even if I felt like there was a slight risk of it being seen. That was the only mic I used. But I had lots of different colors, so I had lots of different shades. Obviously, the brown, white, beige, black.
Right.
And I had lots and lots of them in case anything happened, because they tended to walk off with them.
Yeah. You never know when you get them back, and DPAs are fairly expensive mics compared to the others. So. Don't want to lose those. Let's see. We have another question from Matthias Larson. And Matthias, if you could chime in here and expand this. What it says is, hi, Simon. Interesting to hear about the PA experience. And then it says, where did you place booms in that context?
Oh, yeah. This is like similar to when you're recording music on set and you're doing perspective and then getting tighter and then getting tighter. Where does the boom go? Do you want the sound to get tighter, or do you want that to be the constant? And then, the plants or the mics on the instruments to be the other constant. And then I imagine that's an easier mix in post to give them a constant boom position that doesn't change and doesn't have the drum suddenly much louder, because obviously the directionality. So that's kind of the approach we took, is that I had 2 booms in the space and they were giving me so kind of high left and right perspective of the speakers and the speech. But they were obviously, like Brian and everyone doing the speech, they had their LAVS, and then we had this mic, this audio as well, the handheld mic audio. So the booms were really there almost exclusively, at least in this tent environment, to capture the space of the room. and then my mix was creating that nice balance between the proximity of the lav and finding the right mix between the perspective of the boom and the lav, and trying to make it work make it sound clear, because obviously clarity is the main job. It's making sure that I'm recording clear dialogue, but also dialogue that sounds like it just exists in the room without any synthetic, it doesn't sound like a radio mic.
Right. Sounds like they're coming for you.
Oh yeah, lots of ambulances today, unfortunately.
We have one other question from a friend of mine who's asking, what is your fondest memory on set so far?
Wow, I think possibly like a time when I was very young. I was like 27 or 26 when I boomed on the Hurt Locker. And I had no idea what I was getting into, going to Jordan, Catherine Bigelow, and madness that was.
Who's
but
the
mixer? The mixer was Ray Beckett.
Yeah, Ray.
So working with Ray. Actually, I can't forget to talk about Ray Beckett, because he was absolutely fundamentally a massive mentor for me in my earliest sort of experiences. And he really took me under his wing, and he let me be his boom op, because that job, I thought when he called me up, I thought he was going to offer it to me as an assistant. And I was ready to say, I would love to assist you on this, And I was like, what role do you want me to be? Oh, the boom. Yeah, of course. So I was going right in the deep end with people who are super pros. And so I had to be, but so I suppose the joy of that was kind of those moments where you feel like you're on set, you're one of the few people who are very close to the action. It was all handheld, all charging about wireless electro boom. And it was just the joy of charging after cameras and getting in and getting out and keeping an eye on everything going on. And just, just scenes. There's a sniper scene in the desert. If you've seen it, where they've got a Gatand gun. It's like an extremely powerful sniper rifle. That was a very, very intense scene to film. It kind of starts with Rafe finds, they'd meet up with Rafe, between the cars kind of meet, and then it becomes this sniper situation. And that was filmed over the course of about 3 days in the desert. And it was really tough conditions to film in, and brutal. And there was a picture of me and Ray at the end of one of the days, and we're just like orange with sand, and the Kantar is just, you can barely see the knobs anymore. It's just covered because it gets so much sand flying around. But the satisfaction of kind of going back in the Humvee at the end of the day, bouncing around, getting back to the hotel, stinking and sweating, covered in dirt, and you're like, wow, I think we did a good job there. I think, I'm really happy with that. That it's the end of the day feeling of satisfaction that I kind of get. That is that you can't.
Very cool. I love that. Let's see. There's a couple other questions. Danny Maurer in LA here says, when or what show did your interest in developing products begin?
All right. That's got. Well, my first main job as a sound recordist was a show called The Tunnel. Stephen Delane, Clemence Posey, they play a French and UK detective duo, and there's a killer who's killed in the middle of the Channel Tunnel, and because it was on the line of the border between France and England, both sides have to collaborate in this detective drama to find the killer. So we got to travel to France, and there was a lot of traveling involved in that show. I boomed the first series, and then my first recordist job was to record the second series. And as I'd already spent 25 weeks on the first series, and I knew the cast, and I had, that was my in, and I was really lucky. That was my break. And it was all based on sort of a lovely producer who had my back. But I knew Clemence from the first series didn't like wearing transmitters very much. And she would always wear very tight outfits, very tight trousers, boots. She couldn't put anything around the ankle. And her costumes, she was used, but the saving grace was she had a leather jacket most of the time. So you could hide something on the small of her back. That was about it. But she didn't like any of the straps we had on the first season, which made it difficult to wear her up on the waist. So she was always putting it in her pocket, and it would kind of come out of the pocket. And I felt like we also had like audio 2040s at that time, these big chunky transmitters. So when I did it, I made sure that I had the SMB electrodes are much smaller transmitters, single battery. And we prototyped, before it was even called URSA, we prototyped straps specifically for Clemence for that show. And she would give us feedback about how it felt to wear over the course of a day. And we developed the right sort of sizing for her. And we started off with a totally different fabric, not the fabric that we ended up with for URSA, but we tried out different levels of stretch and all sorts. So really the first job was the Tunnel Series 2, and Clemence was our guinea pig. And yeah, and it kind of started from there.
Nice. Very cool. Awesome. Thank you for the question, Danny. I appreciate it. Let's see. There's another question from Pavel. I believe Koval is the last name, Koval. Which boom mics do you love, exterior and interior? And while you talk about that, we'll pull up some of the pictures of the gear.
Yeah. So I love MK41s, SheerSpeed MK41s. You can't beat them. I use them with a CMC6U preamp and a Cut 60. There's a Cut 60. It's quite a critical part. I know you can get a Cut 1, but it's quite heavy and big. And then the capsule. So I've recently I've got about 6 or 7 MK41s. And like I have some CCMs as well, which are the smaller ones, which are like built-in capsule and the collect cable right out the back. So I have a lot of different ones, and then I have the knuckles, so you can rig them in cars and stuff. So that picture on the screen is on a show called Safe House, and that was my sort of upper mountain rig, and less trolley, and those are CMITs inside the Sonellas. And at that point, I hadn't gone to, obviously, A10s didn't exist, so I was on electro wirelesses, with little with small directional aerials in the bag. But yeah, I use CMITs, Search CMIT 5U, not the digital one, just the regular CMIT 5U outdoors. At least that's what I used to do a lot. But my last job, Hannah, for Amazon Prime, we were often working in woods where it was actually quite quiet, and it's so quiet sometimes you could hear like a little bit of motorway possibly in the distance, or you could hear the Jenny, or so it was quiet enough to hear those little things. And usually when I was like, I'd much rather have an open sounding mic for this than one which was directional, but I wasn't really worried about directionality, because I wanted to hear the atmosphere of these forests. And I felt like using a 41 on a cozy. So Sonella has this much smaller mount called a cozy, and they're flipping amazing. You can bang the pole around, jump about, run backwards, and the cozy, it's got a decent amount of fur around it. And so it's got really good wind protection. It's got a really good suspension, noise reduction. And so that allowed me to use the 41 outdoors. And I've been using that an awful lot now to capture dialogue outdoors, and the CMIT's been sitting in the box a bit more. But you can see by this picture that on the trolley, there's the mic on the third mic to the left. That's what I call my Atmos boom. Yeah, that's the one. That sort of stays on the trolley, or it's on a cable, and I might run it out and put it on a stand somewhere. And that will basically be my Atmos. So all the time I've got a channel recording that mic. Sometimes it just hears me chatting. But if I've got it in the right place, for example, if we have an environment where we have certain noises that will be heard on set, but I want to record those noises clean, that boom is really critical for that. And I've spoken to lots of sound editors who've edited my stuff, and they were really grateful to have just a clean track of room tone, essentially, during the take. And if I'm confident that I've got that boom in the right place, hearing the car passing that you also hear on set over dialogue, I feel like there's no need for me to ask for room tone. And so I focus a lot of my effort on getting my Atmos boom in a good place, and make sure people around it know that that's an Atmos boom, so they're not going to be making too much noise around it. Right. That's often why I position myself in that tent far away from set, so I can have a good Atmos boom sound, and then they can refer to that for the bed, basically, and not have to go to some shit library.
Yeah. What type of mic is in there? Is it a
41? Yeah. Okay. That's 41. 41. Yeah.
It's a good mono.
Yeah, I definitely wanted a 41 for the Atmos, but I didn't want something too directional for the Atmos.
Yeah. Very cool. Very cool. And I really love the tent that you have.
Yeah.
I think it's really, I know I've asked you on 2 occasions now for the information on it, and
You've got everything now, Chris.
you were very
Yeah,
nice
this
to give it to
this
me twice.
company, yeah. This company in the UK, this is actually made, so imagine you're going down a motorway and someone's fixing some kind of, it's, you know, it's 2 things. It's crime scenes and it's fixing traffic incidents or whatever, where you've got people fixing stuff outside of the road.
I noticed, yeah, they also sold body bags.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
So, but it's this wicked tent. Rash Omar, the sound recordist I worked for a lot as his boom op, we did a lot of stuff. This was the tent that he used, and I nicked the idea of him basically. It's a SheerSpeed tent, SHEER speed.co.uk. And it's got clear windows. It steams up a little bit, but you can open up the side so a bit of air comes in. But it's perfect in the evening. So if we're doing a night shoot, I have myself set up in there, and I'll have a little heater. And then the minute you unzip and go inside, it's like walking into a greenhouse.
Yeah.
So yeah, you can't beat it for night shoots.
For sure. I ended up buying, I bought Jeff Wexler's Pelsu tent when he retired. Thank you, Jeff.
I was just going to ask you if I forgot whether I gave you the Pelsu or not, but this looks so much nicer than the Pelsu. I like it being light colored for one thing.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, I got kind of bored with the Pelsu yellow.
Yeah, just the windows. I mean, the windows allow you to just gauge, you know,
Exactly.
the temperature of what's going on outside.
I can peek up. Yeah, I can peek out and then just put my head back down again. And what's the other thing?
Are the antennas just coming out through the window?
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, so there you can see the cable kind of goes through a hole in the side. It's got these vents on the side, so you can just run a cable out, and then I just plug it into the. In that case, you can see I've got a.
And then you just put the antennas outside on their own stand, right? Yeah.
So on the very right of that picture, you'll see a sandbag and a stand, but that's kind of hidden. We're actually just in shot there, but this is like this big 360 thing under a motorway. But we're just kind of hidden by all the grills and stuff.
Oh, yeah.
So we rigged the stand just behind there, and that's my aerials on. So just 2 electro shark fins on the top of that passive, with a decent BNC. I think it's a slightly higher resistance BNC, so it's a slightly better, less loss on the BNC I was using for my aerial cables. But they're slightly stiffer and a bit awkward. Yeah, and the cool thing with the tent is that it kind of pops. So it kind of folds down really flat into a bag that fits in the top of the van, the transporter, VW transporter. And then you open it out by just sort of popping the sides. So you can go pop, 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 and suddenly you've got a tent.
It's real easy to do once you learn how to do it.
Yes.
It's pretty funny to watch people learning how to do it.
Yes. It really, you can end up it falling on your face.
Yeah. I had an overzealous, I was doing pickups for a movie called Us, and I had this overzealous utility that decided to take my Pelsu out to the lot where we were going to do an exterior. And once I got out there, I'm looking at it going, why does the tent look different? And somehow he figured out how to open it inside out.
Oh, wow.
So all the poles were on the outside. And I'm like, how did that work? You know, and apparently it took 2 of them to do it. And and then and it's drizzling.
That's so funny. They must have like turned it inside out, and then when they popped everything out, it was
just that I wasn't there to see it. So the funny thing was those 2 poor guys trying to work together to write it again was like everybody's head was scrambled, and it was hilarious. So luckily, I mean, we had rain rigs, but we didn't necessarily have. It was drizzly that night, but it wasn't too bad. But man, that took some work. It's pretty brilliant. But this picture is funny though. Is this like somebody saying, "Hey, Simon," and you turning and looking?
Yeah, basically. Yeah, caught in the act. But you can see on the left, there are some, next to the boom poles, this is the other key thing on this. See those red kind of small roll, those are BNC drums. And they're made by a company in Canada called, it sounds like Lamac. Oh shit, I'll try and remember and post the thing about it, but they're brilliant. They're just, I don't like the drums, which the cable can be kind of loose and visible. They're very small, and there's like 100 meters of BNC in each of those. Nice. And
so they coil the cable up for you?
Yes, so you kind of coil them with from on the outside, and they coil in there really nicely. And I find those, I bought a couple of those.
I think it might be Lemac.
Lemac, yeah.
Very cool. And then you have your dot. Is this your dot cart over here?
Yeah, that's the one. You can just see that. That's the what they're called, Easy Cart or something. But they've really taken off. You find costume and camera and grips all use those now because they fold up so neatly, and you can bang them in the back of a truck.
Yeah, and you can carry all manner of heavy things in them, and they're
exactly. So if you're going up on you put carpets, or you could put your whole rig in it.
Yeah, they're. I think they're originally made for boating, for people on boat docks and that kind of stuff. So that's where you would find those. Yeah. Very cool. What else do we want to take a look at? And that was obviously your 788T rig, right?
Yeah, that's the 788 and the CL9. And I've got on the very top of the trolley. If you zoom in to the top of the trolley, okay. So see where those poles are coming out just above my bag. So on the left, there's 2 transmitters. So that's public and private. And on the right, there's 2 receivers, Sennheiser receivers, on the other side of the. So it's right kind of above the Octopack there.
Oh,
so those are 2 receivers. So those, my crew, my boom ops, are both wearing transmitter mics, HD26s with a flip down mic, much like the headphones on the side of my trolley on the right.
Right.
So
okay.
boom ops will wear one of those. When they flip it down, it enables the mic. That goes into the transmitter they're wearing on their body next to their receiver. That gets received onto the trolley there, goes into a separate 302 in the back of the trolley you can't see. That then feeds into a return feed, which isn't being recorded and can only be heard by me and them. So that when I talk to them on my private comm, which only goes out on their private line, I then listen to my return, which listens to the same mix I'm normally listening to, plus the feedback from those 2 receivers and the mix. And that way I can have a 2-way, 3-way conversation with my crew. It's not stop, talk, listen, talk, overlapping, but they can all talk at once and have much more natural conversations like that. And so long as the range is good, it works pretty well. So
are those Sennheiser?
Sennheisers,
yeah.
Just G3? Regular G3s, yeah. I think I maybe upgraded the receivers now, so the transmitters that they have are slightly better. But yeah, we put them on 100 milliwatt output for the transmitters that they wear, which is slightly naughty, but that just helps me.
We won't tell.
Us hear each other. Yeah.
Right. Oh, that's cool.
And that's again an idea I stole from Simon Hayes, who has his whole team, sometimes 5 or 6 people. They all have these flip down mics, and they're constantly using that for communications because they learned very early on. I think it was on a film with what was it, Prometheus? I think they were hearing Ridley Scott didn't want to hear like Arthur and Simon chatting, or Arthur. He didn't want to hear Arthur talking. He didn't want to hear all that shit about what the sound department need. So they realized they needed to keep all of that chat completely off the booms, no chat on the booms at all. So that's when they went to HD26s with flip down mics, and I know that idea of him. He does it much better than I do, but yeah.
And was this after a bad take or?
After climbing to the top of a hill, yeah. With far too many clothes on.
I know. I hate it when I expect it to be cold and then I'm dressed for cold, and then you start up the hill and you're sweating inside your jacket more than it is.
Yeah. And that's the first thing I take anywhere is my chair, obviously.
You will schlep that thing everywhere.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool. And I suppose there's a better picture of the rig. Yeah,
that's slightly better. This obviously is some time ago, but yeah, it's kind of
so
basic.
Now you're 688 CL12.
Yeah, so I'd have a 688, and then it has an SL6, I think, which allows 3 receivers, and one of those is an A10, and then I have a PSC rack one, which gives me the other 3 receivers. So giving me 12 altogether, routing between the PSC rack into the SL6 rack to get 12. And I was hoping to get a slightly better. Sorry, you're zooming in now.
Yeah, I noticed. 2 booms. Do you typically have 2 booms on every crew you work on?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And I try to get them both paid relatively parity to each other if possible as well, because you often, when you've got 2 people on set booming, they've both got boom operator skills and radio mic skills particularly. So more and more I've been trying to get the almost equivalent rate between the key boom op and the additional boom op. But yeah, I always do. Even if I'm always recording the second boom, even if it's not doing anything. It's just like another Atmos boom. So I feel like, why not record the channel? It's free. It's free data. Why not just leave the recording? I say just put the second boom over there in a corner, point it out over there, and I'll still record it, and maybe it'll be useful.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anything to help the editors get into and out of a take.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's a big time lifeline.
Mm.
I noticed this cool boat rig you did.
Yeah.
What show was this?
This was called Safe House, and it was filmed in the Isle of. It was in Scotland. Oh, yeah. So it was on a little island, and we were going out, and there was like quite a lot of sailing and boat stuff going on. So it was boat to boat. So obviously we were filming a dialogue happening on a sailing boat. So they had radio mics on, and we had the range was fine, thankfully. But yeah, so we were just recording their exchange on a boat. So yeah, that was that was quite
nice. Those boats are pretty fast too. I've been on something similar, but with those two outboard motors, those things can.
Yeah, it was bouncy. It's very bouncy. The key thing there, I think, is that yes, I have at that time I had a 788, and so the 788 on the trolley stayed on the trolley, and then I had a separate 788 in a bag with another octo pack with all the same frequencies and everything, and all the same card details. So I could hand in 2 cards at the end of the day, one from the bag rig, one from the trolley rig. It wasn't different metadata structures. I wasn't using a very like I explained to you, if I bought a Kantar, I probably wouldn't be able to have a second Kantar in the bag rig. So I would be going from Kantar to sound devices and using different folder structure and name structure and all that sort of stuff. And I feel like that's kind of one of the things I quite like about the small sound devices rigs, is that you can have a bag rig, and then you can have a trolley rig, and that's what I had. You can't see it in the picture, but down below, kind of like cable tied up, is my bag rig.
Nice.
Which goes in the boots of cars, goes in all sorts of wild places where I can't go.
Right. Yeah, my bag is taking rides in helicopters and really fast cars, and I always get it back going, oh, I got your back, yay.
Yeah.
So, well, that's very cool. Very cool. Well, let's, I think we have some questions here. So let's see what we got. Let's see. Oh yeah, somebody was asking for the model number of the headphones. Just one more time.
Yeah. HD. I think I don't have them on. They're HD26 2E. I think they are HD26 2 or IE. And there's a model which they've actually discontinued it, really annoyingly, but now it's always on. So whether it's up or down, it's always on. But they had a slight issue where there was a bit of there's a crackle sometimes when you flick it down. It enables and then it unmutes. But some of now, in order to, if you buy them, they'll always be on wherever they are. But you can there's a guy in the UK called Chris who takes them, engineers it so that they then mute again when you flip them up. So the one I wear on the trolley is constantly on, but it doesn't matter because no one hears it unless I press my button. Right. But the ones that they wear, you don't want them to be constantly on. Otherwise, you'd always be hearing, each other. Both boom ops would always be hearing each other's mic, even if they were offset or in the toilet or something. So you want to have the muting functionality.
Right. Yeah. And it looks like Andres Ponzi he's asking about the mix pre that was on the bottom of your I guess your CLA on that picture. That's how you.
Pre. That was so the mix pre, for spotted, so the mix pre, so that was at a time when I was using cable booms almost all the time, and only going to wireless booms when I had to. So I was using that mix pre, so it's down the bottom. That would be I liked the limiter on it, and I liked the sound. I think the old-fashioned sound devices, mix pre, and I like the 744, and like I felt like the limiter on that was much nicer to my ear than the limiter on the 788. So I'd always go into that and then go line into my my 788 from that, and then I would control it. So that's the only reason that exists. I didn't like the limiter, and I didn't like the preamps particularly on the 788. When going from a 744 to a 788, I could instantly hear oh, there's something missing here. You know, something juicy that wasn't there that came back with that.
Yeah, the 744 was known for those really awesome preamps that it had.
Yeah.
And so moving over to the 6 Series, you didn't see really a reason to keep going that route, or?
To be honest, everything was digital wireless at that point. So everything going into it is already line, you know, so all of the limiting is already handled by the actual record, by the transmitter, or it's all handled elsewhere. So I'm less reliant, I'm not leaning, and my whole workflow has changed to 24-bit, and like obviously you've more headroom, so you don't have to ride it super high, and so I'm less so now, because everything's wireless and everything's line, I don't feel I need that at all anymore.
I had a question about communication, Simon, because there's been in lots of these discussions that we've been having, people talk about communication, you know, amongst their own crew. And for me, communication was never an issue, but that's also because I'm a really old guy and I worked on movies a long time ago. And we really didn't have any need to, I never had any need to talk to my boom operator about anything. And he, of course, never really wanted to talk to me about anything. We just got the work done. But I guess every production is different in terms of how much communication, how much talking you have to do. I know, you know, Mark Ulano typically is, you know, like writing a novel, you know, in everybody's headphones. So it's, how does that work out with you in terms of how much communicating, how much talking do you have to do?
And I find I do a lot, and unfortunately I know how annoying it can be as a boom op to have a sound mixer that likes to talk during takes, and I find it very distracting because you're focusing on what you're doing, your edge, you're remembering the lines of dialogue, and then you've got a sound man going, go up, down, down one, go down, down, you're up, look, up. So what I would do is I think I talk a lot between takes, obviously, to describe what it is that I would like and what could be improved, and obviously things like that. But during a take, I try to keep it to a few, least number of obscenities as possible. But usually it's like information about the framing. And I'm always trying to guide both booms to be right on the edge. So that's generally my focus. Is I'm watching the monitor and I'm saying, okay, boom one, down a little bit, stop. So that will be the limit of it. And that again is a very Simon Hazy type thing. He did it all the time.
Yeah, I guess the big difference with my career is that certainly the first 15 years or more, you know, we had no video assist. That wasn't even something. There's no reason for me to ever be talking to the boom operator in terms of frame lines. And other than that, I think even later discussions that I would have with Don were really just our strategy for a scene. In other words, so you know, I would know what Don's doing, he would know what I'm planning on doing, but we would never talk at all during the take.
It feels like I would appreciate that workflow to happen more as well, because there is a trueness to that as a recording style. And I think when I was first starting out and watching boom ops work, their feed, they didn't want to hear the radio mics. This was actually no, the first boom ops I worked with, they didn't want to hear the mics at all. They didn't want to hear their own mic. They didn't want to have any headphones on. They were happy not hearing it and just trusting the position of the boom. And then they were sort of told, okay, we have to wear headphones now because obviously we're using talkback quite a lot. So that became a thing. But then boom ops would ask, I just want to hear the boom. I don't want to hear the radios. So you would send the boom op, just the boom ops feed and not the mix. So quite often that would be a thing where you send the boom ops, just the boom. But personally, as I went and became a boom op, I was more interested in the bigger picture of it. I was like, okay, I trust kind of what the boom's getting, but I actually do want to hear the radio mics because I feel personally, like I feel that's part of my responsibility is that they sound good. And if I can hear them during a take and I notice there's an issue, then I will know that I can maybe do a quick tweak on checks and adjust a radio mic between takes based on what I heard during a take. So I kind of feel like with the huge number of radio mics all at play now, I feel like that's somehow changed the role of the boom op to, if you've got wigging mics, obviously.
I remember that we always used to talk about the fact that we heard that there were boom operators in the UK did not wear headphones, which I found actually astonishing. They still managed to get the job done somehow, but you're saying at some point that practice sort of stopped and people, boom operators are wearing headphones.
Yeah, they were, but yeah, there's definitely some. I remember working on a job with Owen Beaton, who's worked with Stuart Wilson now an awful lot, and he didn't have headphones when I first worked with him.
Wow.
And that was with a guy called Maurice Hillier, and they just, that was a DAT recording on a DAT, no radios, 816. It was very, very minimal, and yeah, and they got incredible incredible sound. I was amazed. It sounded amazing. And it was very, very, very kind of a lesser amount, less is more approach. But yeah, things have changed an awful lot for that.
Yeah, it's sometimes talking in the middle of a take, it from crew to crew that changes on how much goes on. I know for me, I'll generally stay silent during takes unless the motivation of what one of the 2 or 3 cameras is doing changes drastically, and I'll just, even though, and I tell the boom op, even though you probably know what's going on already, I'm just going to articulate that, not just for you, but for the utility listening as well. Because if B camera decides, oh, we're going to do this, oh no, let's now swing over and get this, then that becomes more important. And at least my verbalization of that can help the utility know that, okay, well, we're always trying to keep whatever's in play up in tip-top shape.
There's another really, really critical thing about this talkback system that has a whole new utilization, which is that I often need to be cued to do certain things, especially playback. If there's a certain moment, I know in Hannah, they used a lot of playback for mood, and the director wanted certain sound effects to be played on set at certain moments. But it wasn't like a relay over a radio and then to an AD next to me. No. So what would happen is my assistant would be on set and she would use her comms to whisper to me the cues that she could see from the director. So it became a way of relaying messages during takes. So I'd just be listening to my return feed during the take and I'd be hearing cues for certain sounds to be played on set. So it worked both ways. So yeah. Talking during takes from the boom op and the assistant that has happened and has helped me a lot as well. So yeah, that's certainly a new thing.
Yeah, well, we have a question from a guy named Angus, which I met the last time. Yeah, last time I was in London, we had coffee. I think that was mid-January. I think you and I met up on that trip too.
Yeah.
He had a question. He says, just a question for Simon. If you get the chance, he says, what is the most important lesson you learned when networking for your initial trainee or utility jobs?
Okay, well, promptness, being the key ones, like get there early, basically. Stay relatively quiet, listen, stay focused on what it is that you need to do and don't be easily distracted by all the shit going on around you. If you're not sure, if you've just been asked something to do and you're not 100% sure what it is you're supposed to do, just be straight and ask again what it is exactly you need me to do. Just say that you don't fully, because the last thing you want to do is go back to the van and then not know exactly what it was that you're supposed to go and get. So I just think honesty is absolutely the key thing when working in a fast sort of dynamic environment, just to be completely straight with what it is that you've been asked to do and be clear about that. So, but what I look for is people who just have a positivity and are just have a positivity, a good attitude to work and a big fun to be around, as well.
Yeah. You definitely want, as somebody who's bringing people onto your team, you want people who want to be there, who want to make that contribution, and they don't get tanked out very easily.
Yeah, it's not too serious as well. Because some people get very serious about it all, and it's like, no, let's just have a nice time. Let's have a giggle, and mess about, and then. So yeah, to be able to be kind of relaxed and also focus on many things. It's hard to give one good piece of advice here, to be honest. But Angus, you're a good guy, man. I'd have you on my team any day, man.
Yeah, he's very cool. Very cool. Yeah. Let's see. Shane Costello from Ireland is asking, are the boom ops wearing transmitters and receivers?
Yeah, they are. Until I can find a better system, which is just like one box. And I believe Zaxcon might have a thing there, but yeah, they do. They have a transmitter and receiver on their belt. And the cable from the headphones ends with a mini jack on one and two mini jacks. One mini jack for the transmitter for the mic, and one mini jack for their headphone feed, and it just runs down a single cable.
And what's your IFB system of choice? Is Electro, Comtech, or something else?
Oh, for the director and everyone.
Well, for boom ops.
Yeah. Well, that's the G3. Yeah.
The G3. Okay.
Yeah. So so we don't really have Comtechs in the UK. It never really caught on. I know Ian Voigt had them at one point, but they were very old, I think, and we've always had G3s as our sort of go-to. So,
but IFBs for director and script and anybody else, you're using what? G3s. Oh, really? Okay.
For all of them. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So I have about 25 of them, basically, you just need tons of them.
Yeah. These are the models of IEMs with the volume knob on them, the big volume knob on top.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. That little clicky volume knob. Yeah, I think the quality is okay. I know that Lectra have come out with a much nicer duet system, and I think that's genuinely, if I got on a nice chunky big drama where there was a demand for real quality in the headphones, then I would be switching over to that. But that's a pretty expensive switch for like 25 of them. So I would maybe think about giving my boom ops duets, and I think that maybe would help the range and give them a better experience. So yeah. Range is so important for your crew. You're not getting cracked when you shit. So.
It really is. You need to be able to lean on that feed and make a lot of judgments based on that, the clarity of that. Understood.
Especially nowadays. I was listening to your talk to the big group chat the other day about having remote comms, remote receivers on set and running those long cables, either, the multiple video and audio and aerial all going down one cable and back to a van, or that kind of thing is going to become quite big consideration now if we start getting into a world of separation between the sound man and the set. I'm not too fond of that idea. I really like to be near. I mean, not super near. I like to be in my own little space, quiet in my own space, away from set. But I don't want to be able to be so far away that I can't go onto set and point at something and say, we need to move that or something, or I just want to be. I want to be able to be near enough to see rehearsals and feel like I'm a part of the show. So I kind of really fear the whole way that this might end up going and sticking,
Yeah, I mean, I'm a big fan of at least being able to see Video Village from where I am. I don't need to be that close to hear every word they're saying, but I like to just, you can just tell. I mean, some directors, when they're watching the monitor during a show or during a shoot, that some directors wear it on their sleeves, like when they like it and when we're getting close, and those are just, to me, things as being part of the team. I love to see that, and who knows, it might take a tent with clear windows to help me achieve that. So because I think
possibly
even on a sound stage, I mean, I think having that tent will just make everybody else feel a little better. It's like, I don't want to wear a mask 24/7.
My isolation tent.
Yeah, but my drums are in here, and
I'm all for that. If we can find a way of staying close without, necessarily being, being safe, we should be working on those sorts of solutions and not like ways to make ourselves less present. I feel like we can't be giving into this whole no boom ops bollocks. We can't be giving into that crap. I'm reluctant to allow people to wire themselves up as well, but I'm afraid that we might be going in that direction. Handing over things to costume and then expecting it to sound amazing is just unrealistic. But it is unfortunately something, for at least in the short term, we're going to have to accept.
Well, I think there's going to be just my own speculation. There's going to be some broad strokes guidelines that come down from AMPTP, SAG, and all these. So there'll be some broad strokes things, but at the end of the day, a lot of it's just going to be, taking those and a common sense application to our filmmaking situations, which, as we know, vary from job to job quite extensively. So it's going to take a lot of interpretation and common sense by us on set to adapt those.
I think productions are sensible, and they're making these big release statements about how they can be run a healthy set. But I think they know that they can't film until social distancing is eased dramatically. We really can't film until we have a social distancing rule, which we can work on set in the way we are normally allowed to work. It just won't function. So I've been offered something in November, and that it's on the basis that social distancing on set isn't a problem, basically. They know that they can't try to pretend to make it work with social distancing on set. So everything's kind of hinging on whether or not we can find a solution.
I would expect normal hierarchy to take place, whereas most of the people's first concern are with the actors, who have to be intimate with each other, and then everything will trickle down from that point. And it's like, obviously, when there's social distancing, you obviously can't have strangers kissing strangers on camera, playing a role. So this is like the first problem that people think about, and then it trickles down to the rest of us. All the workflow parts of it. But there's a question here from Aaron in LA who's just asking, what is let's see, how do we find mentors or professionals willing to take us under their wing and learn, maybe working as boom ops or utility? What advice would you give them coming out of film school now?
All I can really go off is my own experiences here, is that being proactive is really, really the key. My guide was the AMPS directory. Right. And you may have a similar directory in the US where people's names are listed. I mean, obviously Facebook now exists, and forums like JW Sound and LA Sound Mixers are very open, and this sort of thing. I feel in some ways it's slightly easier to introduce yourself to people through social media now, but I would feel like it's better to make a phone call still. It's better to, rather than sending someone a text or sending someone an instant message or Instagram messaging or something like that. I feel that if someone just calls me up out of the blue and says, "Hi, I'm just starting, I want to learn. Can I come in with you?" Then I'm much more open to talking and getting to know that person. And someone did that to me a little while ago, and we met and we had a drink, and it was great. It was we should try to sort of limit social media to sort of, I don't know, this kind of thing, and not business too much. I feel phoning people up is still the right way to make an introduction and meeting people face to face after that point. So I just recommend finding people through some sort of directory, phoning them up. Don't email. Don't bother with emailing people. Phone them up, for God's sake, because then you can talk to them and try to phone. And if it's not a good time, then just ask when you can call them back, and call them back exactly then. And that's what I did. And I called maybe 30 people, and I got some paid work and lots of experience and lots of trainee stuff out of that as a student. And I'd really recommend doing that. And don't call on a Sunday.
Yeah, I would say, polite persistence.
Polite persistence, yeah.
And you can, it's being able to articulate your goals, what you want to learn, helps, because so many people call and they don't actually know what they want to do yet. And so you're now, as somebody calling me, I'm having to peel back the layers of the onion to feel like what they want, to figure out what they want to do. And but yeah, I at least I can say nowadays social media really helps in learning who the players are, learning who does what work. Do your research. That's a big part of it too. Do your research. Know who you're contacting and why you're contacting them. Don't,
Yeah.
I get a lot of messages from people that are just like,
You can see they pasted your name in and
yeah,
everything else. Like you can see this is what really gets me is if you get an email and you can see that this is just the body of it is the same that they send to everyone else. And you can see that they've written your name because the font's different for your name or something like that. And there's little telltale signs that they just haven't even bothered to put the effort in to the email.
yeah.
It's a very good tell that someone might not have the effort.
But there's such a huge amount of information now you can find out about what mixers worked on what movies.
Yeah.
You could find out who the leadership of amps is and where they came from. You can find out the CAS, leadership there and how they were like. There's a lot of information. So do your research, do your homework.
Yeah.
And
I did that with Simon Hayes. It was like watching Lock, Stock and Snatch and being like, can we talk about those films? How did you make it? How did you get that? How did you do that?
Yeah.
And then it's like, oh, wow, I'd love to talk about that with someone,
For sure.
That's the kind of thing. So yeah, just like if it wasn't difficult to find a good reason to have a chat with someone, even if it's just a chat, that's good.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
In terms of getting work, there is a certain amount of luck involved, unfortunately, and timing. So yeah, there's some things you can't invent, no matter how persistent or, it's just sometimes it just comes down to luck.
Yeah, that's the benefit of calling 30 some odd people at once is that one of them will have something coming up, and it's just really is like spinning the wheel and seeing where it lands. But when you're contacting 30 people, chances are if they have a comfortable conversation with you, and then they might know somebody who would be like, you know what, this kid can put a sentence together and is self-aware. And that's kind of what you're looking for. So
yeah, totally. Personality is about 90% of it, basically.
For sure. Yeah, for sure. The same as when I was playing music, you want to pick the guy you're going to have a good time with, not necessarily maybe the best player, but the best personality who will do the job.
Massively important. Yeah, obviously.
For sure.
Cool.
Yeah. So I guess we can wrap this up here. So just for wrapping it up, how many recording rigs do you maintain now? You have your regular trolley, then you have a bag rig. Is there any other little?
Yeah, there's like a VO stroke, sometimes a more portable ADR thing or additional dialogue recording. So that's the 744T. No radios on that one. That's just the 744 in a small bag with a NP battery set up, and So yeah, I've got a Zoom. The Zoom, what do you call them, H6 or something, with the two mics on the top, and then you can plug in mics into it. And I often I don't do that so much anymore because they don't sound that great, the onboard stereo mic, but it is a nice stereo setup. And I have, if you can get it close to an interesting sound, I will put my Zoom recorder just bare with some batteries in it and leave it recording for an hour or so and walk away. And then you will have something that if it rains, whatever, if it gets run over, doesn't matter. It only costs 200 quid or whatever. But like it's getting something that you'll never actually listen to, but someone later on, what I do is I pull all of that stuff. So I did this a fair bit on the shows I was doing, like Hannah and other ones up in Scotland, where you're in some interesting acoustic and interesting audio environments, the active audio environments where there's lots of seagulls or there's bird song or there's certain winds that you want to capture. And you don't really want to go to the hassle of trying to do it properly. So this feels like an option. I always feel it's better to record something rather than nothing. I would rather, even if the quality isn't quite there, I'd rather be able to capture it than not capture anything. So I have this little heli case with the Zoom recorder in, and if I feel like we're in an interesting environment, then it will go out and I'll stick it on a roof, or I'll put it somewhere in a bush and I'll leave it recording, and occasionally I might move it. And at the end of the day, I'll just take all that data and I'll bring it onto my laptop. I might rename them. I'll listen to the first beginning. I'll intro them, obviously doing an audio intro. And then at the end of the job, I'll hand over that along with a big list of to the sound directly to the dialogue editor, because they're the ones that actually use it. And I'll send them, these are my wild tracks, and I'll just send it directly to them. I'll hand them over a hard disk, which has all of my wild tracks on and all of my atmospheres and stuff. And they're all like scene related. So obviously they'll know, okay, that relates to that actual episode and that scene or that moment. So yeah, that would be my,
you have a
That would be
playback
my-
card or a music card or anything, or you just?
I use my laptop, and that usually sits on a box next to me. It's very basic. I haven't done enough musical stuff to need anything more. Like, I've never really gone into the world of Pro Tools playback that I've managed myself. So really, my playback is limited to running a sound. You know this cool app that I use. It's called Soundboard. And you see this, and you press buttons, and you can. So sometimes my playback is my phone, and I'll have my cable coming out of that going into one of the channels, and I'll be playing back sound effects and music just by pressing buttons on this. And I find that, soundboard, yeah.
Nice.
And so you can just kind of, oh God, where's the screen? You can just kind of name things, and then when you press it.
But that's not how Mr. Whedon would describe your relationship.
And I will be queuing in playback either onto a speaker to allow for phone conversations and stuff. So quite often on shows, it's like, we'd already recorded the other side of the conversation. And like Paddy Considine, who's listening on the phone, he wants to hear that. He doesn't want someone else to read that in. And I can play it in on set, and I'll play it in and I'll cue it. And I'll add all of these in different numbers, and I'll just play them back onto a speaker on set so we can hear the real timing and the real voice.
Very cool.
And I don't bother with, because often we're out in the field, and I don't want to pull out my laptop. The battery might die, but I know I can charge this on set. So this is more becoming a key part of my kit than ever.
Cool. No, that's awesome. And it's called, what was it called again? Sorry, it was
Sound Plant. I actually had to buy it. It cost something like $70. But like Soundboard. There were a few. It's Soundboard.
Okay.
I think I bought the premium version. Otherwise, you get annoying stuff. But
ads and all that stuff.
It's damn useful. And the way of getting stuff into it is I can kind of import over like AirDrop, I think.
Mm-hmm.
But sometimes in order to just get onto it, I literally put this into voice memo record mode and put it next to my headphones and just record it directly onto that. It's the fastest way I can get something onto this without using a laptop. I wish there was a way on sound devices to sort of AirDrop to a phone, some kind of communication between the recorder and my phone. That would be very handy.
Oh, that's cool.
Other
than emailing it to yourself and doing
rather than that, because even an email is quite difficult to then get it onto Soundboard.
Nice.
It being an Apple product, it being an Apple, and it's difficult to communicate with Apples, basically.
For sure. Let's see. A question from Carl Weldon out of New York. Have there been any projects that you just thought went so poorly that you didn't want your credited?
Yeah, but I don't even want to talk about them. Oh my God.
Simply yes is fine. Yes.
Yeah. Oh yeah, many. I used to do lots of short films and student films. I used to do lots and lots of I love doing short films. I haven't done one for ages and ages, but like when I was between booming and recording, I was doing lots of short films all the time. And quite a few of those have never seen light of day, and I'm quite grateful for that.
Well, those are the proving grounds. That's where we learn. Especially short films are great because that's like the microcosm of the entire process, and it's all compact, and you can see every part of the process going on around you. So
did you use a pseudonym?
Yeah, I should have.
Yeah. The favorite ones are Mike Russell and Justin Frame. Things like that.
Right.
Yeah.
I've heard of Mike Russell. He's very common.
Yeah, there was one movie where I was only hired to do 3 days of pickups. This was like 2010, something like that, and they wanted to give me the credit for the entire movie, and because there was a disaster story about the mixer that did the movie, who just was kind of universally hated amongst the entire crew for whatever reason, and then they wanted to give me credit for the whole movie, and I'm just like, I was only here 3 days. Like,
sometimes it's those awful jobs where you learn the most, though. Where you have those bad experiences and you know what not to do again, definitely, or at least what not to take again. The warning signs, that first conversation with the director who is asking for something unrealistic and behaving in a way which doesn't have any respect for what he really is trying to, for the professions involved in the making of a show. I chose at the time to ignore the warning signs and go ahead anyway, and it was
It can be tough because, you know, as a sound mixer, and I know this is, you know, for me moving forward now, it's still one of the toughest parts of my job is, you know, I properly research the directors I work with, but finding what their background is. So you have directors, some directors are a literary background. Some directors are cinematographers, former filmmakers. You know, James Cameron comes from props in our department. And so you know, their points of engagement with the process, but then there's others where it's just really hard to pin down at what point they start caring about certain things that we can have control over, and then at what point they just lose bandwidth, and it does you no good to flood them or advise them or flood them with information that they can't process. So you're always just trying to work that threshold with your creative team, and that's you know, that's the thing. Well, I think we can wrap it up. If anybody has any other questions, feel free to chime in. But Simon, I really appreciate you making time for us. I know doing this for an hour and a half or hour and 40 minutes.
Chris, thank you for doing it. Thank you for doing them. You know, it's really great that you're doing this. It's cool.
I mean, we all know you as the URSA guy, but it's really neat to understand, you know, the history, where you came from and how you got into it, and how mentorship played the role in helping you get started.
How esports help. If you weren't here at the beginning, if you're interested in the documentary I made about esports, and it's called Modern Day Gamer, and you can find it on YouTube. It's had about 2 hits, Modern Day Gamer 1 and 2. They were the first things I ever did, and I wanted to be a director, and I wanted to shoot video gaming documentaries. And I still do. It's so interesting. I still watch a lot of esports. I'm flipping and love watching esports.
My kids watch so many. They play video games, but then they go to YouTube and watch their favorite gamers play on these YouTube channels.
Yeah, it's great. It's great entertainment. It really is.
Yeah, I mean,
especially StarCraft and the strategy games and stuff.
Oh yeah. Oh, well, you know, I grew a beard playing Myst. Well, even bigger than this. Playing Myst back in the 90s. Oh my gosh. That hypnotic music, that's solving the puzzles. Like seeing, you know, it's
He's done another really good one, actually, the guy that did Myst.
Yeah. Well, very cool. Well, thank you so much, everybody. We will shut it down unless there's any other questions. Feel free to speak now. Forever hold your peace. And
or just send me a message on Messenger or something. I'm happy.
Good point. Yeah. How can people contact you? What's the best way?
Facebook's a good route. Yeah, Facebook, a Messenger, just friend and send me a message. Yeah. Happy to chat.
Very cool. Thank you so much. All right. We'll see you guys later next time.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you for tuning in.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Nobody's leaving.
We're still here. Cool. Wow, that was long.
All right, so
how was that for you, Jeff?
Stop the live stream now, and I'm going to stop the recording. No, that's not it. Here we go.
Thank you for